Our black communist brothers and sisters would argue that class created racism, that capitalism developed racism in order to perpetuate and sustain its greed. Those of us who are Pan-African and say, hell no, you can eliminate capitalism today or tomorrow, you still will have racism. You have racism in communist countries, you have racism in religious nationalist countries, you have racism in capitalist countries, you have racism under every type of government that the European has. So it is not the economic or political system that breeds racism. It is the natural hatred that the European has for the African and the natural jealousy that the European has for the African's past, his historical accomplishment. See, there's three things that necessitates the extermination of the African and the benefit of the European. Number one, your genetic power. If the European wants to exterminate Africans, he must kill them. If the African wants to exterminate Europeans, all he has to do is cohabitate with their women. You can exterminate an entire population of Europeans just through your genetic power. That is a significant threat. And that's one of the reasons why segregation is as important to Europeans today as it was yesterday. The reason why they don't want black people in the community is because your son might end up with their daughter, and by doing that you threaten the gene pool. It's about the survival of a recessive gene trait. So biologically, Europeans must be segregation by nature if they believe in self-love. Just like black people must have been conditioned to hate themselves if they are integrative in nature. Because integration destroys, segregation preserves. So first you have the biological need. Of course you have the capitalistic need. Why? Because Africa is the richest piece of real estate on the face of the earth. It is the only continent of the 6 that can survive totally self-sustaining without the need to do business with any of the other 5 continents. Europe is not a continent, that's why I said 6. Okay? Africa could do its business and take care of its people without the need of Europe, Asia, or any other continent. Not North America, not South America. Africa can be self-subsisting. And that's why the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Bilderbergs, the Trilateral Commission, the Order of Rome, this is why they impose structural adjustment programs on Africa. They rape their economies. They prevent them from being able to control any of the goods that they sell so they can pull all their American junk in Africa. And as a result of that, European capitalists get rich and Africa gets broker and broker. So they're jealous of you because of your genetic power. They're jealous of you of your resourceful power in terms of Africa. They're jealous of you of your historical accomplishments. Everybody knows that the greatest civilizations on earth, which is not limited to Egypt, were all African. Everybody knows that Africa once ruled the world, but they didn't need to rule it with a gun. They ruled it with their mind. Everybody came and drunk from the knowledge and the wisdom of the mother continent. That breeds jealousy. If I know you have a history of success and I don't, that breeds jealousy. If I know you can exterminate my race just by cohabitating with my women, that breeds jealousy. And the third reason that Europeans fear Africans, and one of the main reasons why they want to exterminate African people, is because they are afraid that if we ever came to power, we would do to them what they have done to us. So there is not really the guilt, but the fear of karma. The fear of ma'at, the fear of being paid back by the people whom you have mistreated in the same manner in which they have been mistreated, or possibly 10 times worse. So yes, if you are a European, you go to sleep every night possibly wondering about what would ever happen if that black man took control of the world.
It's just been awful how they've did us in religion. And our people tend to think that even those who feel that they know that white Americans have mistreated us, their grandchildren or great-grandchildren still mistreating us in a lot of ways, they still believe, well, but nobody would lie about God, when that's not true. People who are trying to subjugate another people and turn them into slaves, not just physically, but mentally, then they certainly would try to teach them that God looks like me.
A lot of people say it doesn't matter what Jesus looked like, it doesn't matter what God looked like or other deity. But the thing is, if it did not matter what Jesus looked like, why don't they show what the original paintings and pictures of Jesus look like? Why don't they show what the original paintings and pictures of the disciples look like? Because that's very important to know if it doesn't matter.
When Michelangelo was told by the Pope to put the picture of the Holy Family on the roof of the chapel, Michelangelo said and the Pope specifically told him to make it European. Michelangelo explained to him that there are no models of a European Holy Family. And so he said, you'll think of something, and he did. He used his family.
We thought the only guy we had was the one that white people gave us, which was Jesus, okay? And he looked like them. And when we saw them, psychologically, we would transfer that was deity. If it really was unimportant what he looked like, then why didn't he look like some of the majority of the people on earth? Why would he look like the people who are the minority race on the entire earth? We're not the minority.
People always ask me, why do the black church not get rid of the white Jesus and put a blue black Jesus in place with a nappy head? Because black people would stop going.
Remember, when they attacked Africa, they did not attack Africa physically. They did not attack Africa educationally. They attacked Africa spiritually. Jomo Kenyatta said when the European first came to Africa, the Africans had the land and the white man had the Bible. White man told him to close his eyes, get on his knees and pray. Jomo said when the black man opened his eyes, the white man had the land and the black man had the Bible. We have bought into a story that we told them. They have twisted it. They got it twisted. We have now bought that story back. Boukman, Haitian Revolution, the original revolutionary, because he was turned in the night of the revolution. That's when Toussaint Louverture took over. The book Irritated Genie, we need to rename him Boukman. Boukman was called Boukman from Jamaica because he couldn't be handled in Jamaica. He was sold at Haiti. He started a rebellion amongst the African people. And they knew him as Boukman because they always read. He was very intelligent. He always taught the people who they were and what they were. The night before the revolution, Boukman looked to his brothers and sisters in the field. And he said, you want to win? Cast aside your white God. Embrace your African spirit. You are free. He didn't say you will be free. He didn't say you can be free. He didn't say you could be free. He said, cast aside your white God. You are free.
A slave master is a slave master, whether he's controlling you in the interest of harm or controlling you in the interest of his own benefit. And unfortunately, African people have not been able to distinguish between a slave master and someone who is doing some sort of benevolent service for the sake of that service. There's no college, no institution, no effort, no corporation I know of funded by Europeans that in some way, shape, or form does not serve the interests of the European who funds it. And unfortunately, we have become so greedy for the health of other people and so dependent on white love in the form of philanthropy that we can't see that the funding that we're being given is being used as a noose around our neck to control our behavior. For example, if you take the NAACP and Urban League, both of them started by Europeans for the interests, so-called interests of black people. They may fight for some degree of progress, but there's always a limit, an invisible ceiling on how far they will actually take the progress of the race. They fund you to control you. No European is going to fund any African initiative that seeks to make the African equal to the European. Equality is a sin in European culture for black people. So everything is done to make sure that whites will always be given advantage over blacks. See, white supremacy has two fists. The left fist is white racism against black people. The right fist is white privilege for white people. It's two hands. Okay? And what we fail to realize is that when Europeans fund black people, they fund them for their own destruction. They fund you to control you. In fact, I've come across some research recently that says the FBI and the CIA are actually funding black organizations, unbeknownst to the black organization, simply to control their direction. Because if the money you need for progress is coming from me, I can erase that progress overnight just by stopping the funding. The only way we will be able to achieve what we need to as a race on this earth, as was taught to us by all of the great Pan-Africanists, from John Brown Russwurm to the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, is to do it by ourselves and for ourselves.
A Seattle police officer is caught on tape talking about making up evidence while two wrongly arrested men sat in jail. It's the latest shocker uncovered by a Como 4 problem solver investigation into the SPD's vanishing videos.
Problem solver Tracy Vetter talked to the men who filed a claim against the city today for excessive force and wrongful arrest.
Josh Lawson, Christopher Franklin. November 16, 2010. Seattle police arrest them at gunpoint. Their lives changed forever.
I thought I was going to die.
It was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced.
Both men say they suffered facial bruises and swelling after one was kicked and the other manhandled into the pavement. But then listen to what an officer says after he takes them to jail.
Now, you're going to jail for robbery. That's awesome. Robbery. I'm going to make stuff up. Robbery. Here on out.
Listen again.
I'm going to make stuff up.
Christopher Franklin believed him.
He showed me that he has the power to do whatever he wanted that night. He has a badge, and all we can do is nothing.
Together, we watched the video of their arrest. I need to make this clear. Neither Lawson or Franklin has a criminal record, nor were they charged with anything after this arrest. They both work full-time and go to school. But the night of their arrest, they were here in this neighborhood near Seattle Center, several blocks away from where an assault was reported.
Got beat up by a couple guys.
In the 911 call, a witness described those assailants.
It was two tall, skinny African Americans.
Lawson is 6 foot, Franklin just 5'9", and they were wearing...
I could tell that they were both wearing jeans.
These are the booking photos. Lawson is wearing white sweatpants. Franklin's jeans are allowed to fall to his knees after his shoes are taken away. And at the scene, an officer pulls his hood up over his head.
I felt like he was making me look like the part.
I mean, these guys are guilty of being black in Seattle.
Attorney Liz Ann Padula represents Lawson and Franklin. She believes if they'd been white...
I think the most that would have happened with those kids, police officer would have rolled down his window and said, hey, were you guys over in this area?
But Officer Brad Richardson, seen here, never questions the two about any assault. Instead, Officer Richardson makes what's called a felony stop, taking cover behind his door with a drawn gun. Now, in this use of force report, he says both men ignored his commands to stop and kept walking towards him. But Franklin and Lawson say that's crazy. There's no way they'd keep walking towards a cop with a drawn gun.
We got on the ground and we froze.
I was terrified. I thought I was going to be murdered in cold blood.
So he says I want to make stuff up.
Yeah. We showed Seattle Police Sergeant Sean Whitcomb the arrest video. He admits the comment was inappropriate, but says the department's Office of Professional Accountability investigated this complaint and exonerated the officer.
I can tell you we take them seriously, but people have to believe that. They have to trust the system. They have to trust the process.
Another problem, none of the arrest is caught on tape, only the aftermath, with Lawson's angry questions of why Officer Richardson kicked him in the face.
I told you I kicked you in the chest. For what? For what? I want that for what?
For more than a year, the Como 4 problem solvers fought to get access to SPD's video database, knowing that dash cam videos could play a critical role in citizen oversight of the troubled department. We're now suing SPD for what we believe is a violation of the Public Records Act. Our investigation uncovered, among other things, that the department had lost tens of thousands of dash cam videos. Attorney Padula contacted us, wondering if her clients were among that group.
And it wasn't really until, I was able to communicate with you and your knowledge of what's out there and what the videos mean and your investigation that it was like, oh, wait, there's not just one video that we don't get. There's more.
The problem solvers discovered at least 3 other dash cam videos exist of the Lawson-Franklin arrest, but none show Officer Richardson during the critical time period when he had Lawson and Franklin at gunpoint and later kicked Lawson.
Are you going to hold officers accountable if they don't turn cameras on?
We do. We actually do. Look at our OPA report.
It didn't happen in this case.
Well, maybe not in that case, but there's other cases.
I think it's reprehensible. To me, there's no excuse for that.
We've learned that video could have been salvaged from the hard drive in Officer Richardson's dash cam system, but wasn't. We continue our investigation into SPD's vanishing videos tomorrow with another distressing case where police had a potentially dangerous suspect hold up, but decided to walk away. Tracy Vetter, Como 4 Problem Solvers.
There's a police officer getting out of his car and then repeatedly hitting a man who appears to be just standing on the street. Did the officer go too far? That is the question tonight. Eyewitness News reporter Jen Maxfield is in Passaic with much more. Jen.
He got into a violent confrontation with police, and it was all caught on that surveillance camera. 1 week after the beating, Ronnie Holloway's eye is still black and blue, but it's an improvement. This is what it looked like right after he was arrested.
I don't know why he did that. To this day, I don't know why. I respect the law and police and stuff.
Last Friday, surveillance footage shows Holloway waiting outside Lawrence's restaurant in Passaic when a police cruiser pulls up and a female officer asks Holloway to zip up his sweatshirt. Holloway appears to comply, but in an instant, Officer Joseph Rios III jumps out and starts beating him.
He grabs me, both hands by the collar, and slings me into the car.
That's not all. Officer Rios beats Holloway with his fists and his baton. The 49-year-old, who is on medication for schizophrenia, does not appear to resist, but that doesn't stop Officer Rios. At one point, he seems to stand Holloway back up, only to body slam him into the police cruiser. Officer Rios' partner looks like she's trying to intervene, but the punches don't stop until backup arrives.
I admire the police, but since I learned from this situation.
Holloway, who says he has no police record, was arrested on charges of resisting arrest and wandering with the intent to buy drugs. He has filed a complaint and an internal affairs investigation is underway.
It is a clear example of police brutality, and it's got to stop. That officer needs to be removed from the police force.
Officer Rios is a 7-year veteran of the Passaic Police Department. He remains on active duty. Holloway supporters will gather tomorrow at noon at Passaic City Hall for a rally against police brutality.
That 17-year-old Trayvon Martin walked to the store for a bag of Skittles and iced tea, and he never made it home. He was murdered by the neighborhood watchman you're seeing there on the other side of the screen, George Zimmerman. It was Trayvon's look, too, that Zimmerman says made him suspicious, and a hoodie became a symbol of racism.
This case has polarized the nation along racial and political lines.
Just because someone wears a hoodie does not make them a hooligan.
I am urging the parents of Black and Latino youngsters particularly to not let their children go out wearing hoodies.
Our son was not committing any crime.
We need to work very hard to make him much more than a symbol.
Our son is your son.
The 13th Amendment reads, slavery is abolished except when you are found guilty of a crime and go to jail. So prison is the slave plantation. And look at all the things that are denied you in jail is the same thing that were denied Africans on the plantation. Slavery still is very much alive.
Today, there are more African American adults under correctional control in prison or jail on probation or parole than were enslaved in 1850, a decade before the Civil War began. Crime and crime rates did not drive mass incarceration to begin with. Incarceration rates have fluctuated over the years, gone up, gone down. Today, are actually at historical lows, but incarceration rates, especially black incarceration rates, have consistently soared regardless of whether crime is going up or going down in any given community or the nation as a whole. War on drugs, which has been a major engine of mass incarceration, has targeted poor communities of color, especially black and brown men, even though studies have consistently shown now for decades that people of color are no more likely to use or sell illegal drugs than white.
Before 1964, the prison rate in America, the majority of people in prison were white people, were white guys. But the thing is, there was no need to have a strong police presence in the black community because black people were already controlled by the basic laws of the land. Black people were already controlled by Jim Crow laws, signs saying black people drink from this water fountain, black people couldn't live in this neighborhood. So black people were just controlled, period, at that time. Now, after the Civil Rights Bill passed in 1964, this is when the police presence became very strong in the black community, because the average citizen couldn't control black people like they could before then. So they came up with another strategy and had law enforcement do it. So around 1964-65, black communities were flooded with law enforcement. And this is why the Black Panthers was started, because of the police brutality that had started in the black community.
Prisoners themselves represent a small percentage of the population under correctional control. Like today, there's about 7.6 million people under correctional control, but only about 1.3 million are in prison of that. The rest are on probation, parole, in jail, overwhelmingly for, minor nonviolent offenses and drug offenses. The problem is that even if you don't get prison time, even if you're lucky enough to get just felony probation, you're saddled for the rest of your life with a felony record. And so the question isn't, in my view, just who's in prison. The question is, who is branded a criminal or felon and must live with that label for the rest of their lives.
The people said, well, if we don't need black labor anymore, what do we do with it? Well, we have to set up a system in the commercial system, or at least incorporate black people into the commercial system so that they make us money without having to do the labor of we're picking cotton or picking sugar cane or whatever. We're already past that. So how do we make a more sophisticated plantation where we can keep slaves? Well, let's criminalize pretty much every damn thing that we do. There are over 1 million laws on the books now. Who needs 1 million laws? Unless you want to control people's behavior.
The police presence has always been in the black community because we are prisoners of war. That's number one. The original police were created to catch slaves. They were slave catchers. There was no need to police a white society. There was no need for that in early America. There was no need for that. Police even became wild when police were always about guarding property. That's what the police are about, guarding property. That's it. Their job gets stretched out to a moral responsibility and public safety and that kind of thing later on in their development. But the original concept of a police officer is to make sure your property stays with you. They are hired by the rich, first of all, to protect the rich's property.
A lot of people don't know the original design for the Statue of Liberty was a black female. As a matter of fact, in a museum in New York, you can see the original design of the Statue of Liberty, which is a black woman. When the French artist created the Statue of Liberty, it was supposed to represent the end of slavery. On the original model, there were chains on the hands and feet, as we know. When the statue got to America, they wanted to erase any references to slavery from the statue. But the artist really thought to keep the chains on there because this is your art. You don't want people tampering with your art. And if you look, the chain is still on the foot of the Statue of Liberty to this day.
Well, the story was that it was a gift of the French to the slaves, and that the original statue had the picture of a black woman, the original model for it, and it had a distinctly African face. But it was Europeanized because the people in the United States did not want to have a black face sitting up there in their harbor, so they carved it out. In France, they had to go back to the drawing board and remodel the face after the what they call the patron saint of Manifest Destiny. So the patron saint of Manifest Destiny, that's her face on the what they call the Statue of Liberty, which was transposed from the African face. In fact, you see the patron saint of Manifest Destiny in the symbol for Columbia Pictures at the beginning of the movies. That's the patron saint of Manifest Destiny. Post-slavery Africans were consolidated. They were more together than ever. Segregation gave them the necessity, or created the necessity for them to maintain a type of cohesion with each other, no matter if it was infighting. They still had their self-interest and the collective interest. So we didn't know who the enemy was back then. Today, after integration, we don't know who the enemy is anymore.
Why was Muammar Gaddafi killed? Muammar Gaddafi was murdered because he, along with the other African heads of state, were about to bring into existence Africa's first central bank. They were erecting a central bank in Africa, which was going to do what? Back its money to the resources under the ground in Africa. Now, what would that have done to the global economic order? Remember, the United States dollar isn't backed on any natural resource. The British pound isn't backed on any natural resource. The Canadian dollar, the European Union, their currency isn't backed on any natural resource because Europe doesn't have a lot of natural resources. Africa does. So if they would have been successful in creating a central bank of Africa, coming up with a unitary currency, and then backing that currency to the material wealth under the soil, they would have bankrupted every other economic system in this world, from America to Europe to China. That was revolution, and that's why Muammar Gaddafi had to be assassinated, because he was about to help the African heads of state eliminate modern slavery and neocolonialism from the continent.
The year was 1954. The United States Supreme Court had deliberated within the Brown versus Board of Education lawsuit. They wanted to come up with a way that they could maintain racial supremacy while at the same time allow schools to integrate. One of the judges of the Supreme Court said that he voted for integration of the schools, not because he favored racial equality, but because he felt that white supremacy could be even more successful with black children sitting next to white ones. All right. In 1954, the mental gifted movement was started in the United States as a strategy to resegregate black children from white ones. Because the Supreme Court said race no longer had a place in public education. A new strategy needed to be developed to resegregate black from white. And that became mental giftedness. If you look at Jackson Public Schools, if you look at New York, if you look at Philadelphia, you'll find that although our children are overpopulated in classes for the educably mentally retarded and the learning disabled and the emotionally disturbed, you'll find that very few of them walk around with the label of mental giftedness. Mental giftedness was created as a strategy to ensure that the education of white children was superior to that of black children. But it did not work for long because many white students weren't intelligent enough to score very superior on the intelligence test. All right. And the intelligence test itself is quite interesting because that word, intelligence quotient, grew out of and was developed in Adolf Hitler's Germany. People don't tell you this, but it was an Adolf Hitler scientist, William Stern, who created the concept of intelligence quotient, the ability to ascribe a number to how intelligent somebody is. We know it's a myth. The only purpose of the intelligence test is to justify why some people get access to opportunities and others do not. What is the relationship between your child's IQ score and their ability to finish their bachelor's degree? What is the relationship between your child's IQ score and their ability to finish a law program? What is the relationship between your child's IQ score and their ability to finish med school? It's almost zero. So if the test has no predictive validity, why do we use it? Because testing is the new Jim Crow. Testing is the new colors only line. Testing is the new strategy of eugenics to justify why our children are being turned into a permanent underclass when others are not. when mental giftedness failed to sustain the separation of the races. In 1963 in Chicago, Illinois, a psychologist created something called the learning disability.
Wow.
For the first time in American public school history, a child with no obvious defect. They weren't blind. They weren't deaf. They weren't autistic. They didn't have a brain injury. They weren't orthopedically impaired. They weren't moderately or severely mentally retarded. They had no obvious evidence of being any different from any other child, except the belief. The belief. The belief. The belief, not that, that the teacher or the principal or the school psychologist believed that they had a deficiency. And because we are allowing people, many of whom don't understand our children or come from our cultural background, diagnose them with disabilities that can't be proven to exist. The trifling part about special education, the trifling part about my work in the schools, isn't so much that the school is trying to deliberately miseducate under the excuse of a label, but because you, black mothers, you, black fathers, you, black grandparents, you, black foster parents and adopted parents, aunts and uncles, big brothers and big sisters, give permission for them to do so. See, there's 2 million black children in special education. There's 2 million black people in jail. So if you do the equation, special education is preparation for incarceration. Special education is where black boys go when no one wants to teach them until they're old enough to go to jail. Special education is where black girls go when no one wants to teach them until they're old enough to get pregnant and live off public assistance. Special education is a throwaway shelter for children who are not only not wanted by the district, but sometimes not wanted by their own parents. See, I've come to learn that we love these labels just as much as the school system do. I've come to learn that we love it when someone tells us that our child has mild mental retardation. We love it when someone tells us our child is learning disabled. We love when someone says Raheem has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We love it when they say that they're emotionally disturbed. We love it when they say that the conduct disorder. Why? Because now we have an excuse not to do our job. And so we're looking for the labels as quickly as the school system is. Because you want to shift your responsibility for being a parent onto somebody else. And so when someone says he's learning disabled, you feel like you're no longer responsible. When somebody says he has a behavioral problem, you think that you're no longer responsible. What's the difference between a learning difference and a learning disability? What's the difference between a slow learner and somebody with mild mental retardation? What's the difference between being socially maladjusted and being emotionally disturbed? What's the difference between having ADHD and simply needing to be taught how to act when you're not at home? My father was a drill instructor for the United States Marine Corps, Parris Island, South Carolina. In my house, he wasn't allowed to catch ADHD. It was a disease that was not sanctioned by my father. In my house, and his 5 boys, not one of us was diagnosed with conduct disorder because it wasn't allowed. There was no oppositional defiant disorder. It wasn't condoned.
That's right. That's right.
But when you strip the black community of its economic infrastructure,
there you go.
And in the 60s and 70s, you begin moving factories out of our homes, which at one time many black men and women could graduate from high school and take care of a family with no college education, but you started stealing that away in the 70s. And at the same time you started stealing that away, you started building prisons. And then the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, Crack Import Association. brought cocaine and dope to sedate black men who felt that they were not living up to their responsibilities as men. And to help this out, in 1975, the United States government for the first time gave us a national special education law. Listen to this. The definition of a learning disability is the inability of a child with normal intelligence to learn a scholastic skill. The inability of a child with normal intelligence to learn a scholastic skill. If your son has normal intelligence, if your daughter has normal intelligence, if your grandchild has normal intelligence, how can it be possible that they can't learn to read? How can it be possible they can't learn to write? How can it be possible they can't learn to do math? Is it the child with a learning disability or the teacher with an instructional disability? Is it the child with a learning disability or the school with an academic disability? Is it the child with a learning disability or the school district with a failure to love disability? See, a good teacher is no different than a good therapist.
All right, brother. How do you see the black man today?
Well, there's basically two types of black men on earth. As a Pan-Africanist, I deal with black men in general, the world over. There's the black man who chooses, by virtue of the pressures exerted upon him by white supremacy, to accommodate white supremacy, to join the system, to become the European's bitch. And then there's other black men who choose to stand up and fight the system. Those like you and I, the brothers here, who would rather give their life than betray their race, or in any way, shape, or form give Europeans the inclination or belief that we would ever allow them to mistreat our people or our community. So you got two types of black men, those who fight and those who give in. You got two types of black men, those who talk and those who struggle. You got two types of black men, those who are humble enough to accept constructive criticism, and those who think that they have all the answers and are never incorrect. Okay, but the biggest problem we have with black men, Brother Sarnetta, is ego. E-G-O, which stands for emotions gone overboard. And when you cannot control your emotions long enough to give another brother an opportunity to express his opinion, then you emasculated yourself. Because the running mouth is the talking bitch, and we don't need any more of that. We need strong black men, those who can confidently and calmly express their opinion without shouting and braying like an ass.
Powerful.